Blessings. Welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're in 2 Kings chapters 8 and 9, and then we go to 2 Chronicles and we're in chapter 21 verse 4 going all the way through chapter 22 verse 9. Good information, lots of little stories in there about what's going on in the two different kingdoms, another war with Aram. And we see a lot of things going on here as far as the leadership of the countries. And the good leaders and the bad leaders and the ones that have good influence and the ones that have bad influence, and how that affects the kingdom and the future of the kingdom. We see in the story in 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles are very similar, but there's a lot of details in one that are not necessarily in the other, back and forth. But anyway, I chose to do the daily devotional today from 2 Chronicles instead of 2 Kings, and usually it's reversed. We look at the accounts out of Kings, but I like the 2 Chronicles better today. So right off the bat, Jeroboam is the king of Judah, and he's not a good king. Judah's been having some really good kings, while Israel has not yet had a single king. And spoiler alert, they won't up until they're exiled. The entire line of kings of Israel, God either categorizes them as bad kings or evil kings. I mean, there's no good in there at all. But a lot of it, we've talked in the past about Jeroboam being that evil influence as the first king of Israel, and it went all the way through, and Ahab and Jezebel added to it and really expanded the evilness of worshiping false idols. And we see that again today, because this king Jehoram, his wife was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, and Jezebel's still alive. So that evil influence has gone from being in the monarchy of Israel. Now it is influenced and kind of crept its way into the monarchy of Judah in the line of David, and God doesn't stand for it. Anyway, Jehoram's the king. As soon as he makes king, Edom or Moab, or both of them eventually, or Edom starts it, but Edom revolts and says, "We're not going to serve you anymore." And so he goes and he tries to control and put down that revolution, but he's unsuccessful, and all of a sudden Moab revolts. And as a king, if you can't control the rebellions, all of a sudden all the little groups that have something against you are like, well, he couldn't defeat them, and he couldn't defeat them, and they start popping their heads up, and man, you got all kinds of problems. And we see this. He starts having problems, and he can't control what's going on in the kingdom, to the point where in 21:16, three other nations see the weakness of this king and how he can't control his own kingdom, and then they attack. So we have the Philistines, we have the Ethiopians, and there's another kingdom in there that I can't remember right offhand. But so he is just getting pummeled, and it's God's judgment because of the influence of Jezebel and Ahab, and how his kingdom has turned evil. He even follows their lead in putting up these little places of worship of false gods all around Jerusalem, which is absolute revolt against God and his authority and his rule. So it's so bad that when the king dies, that it says the people do not even regret it, and they don't bury him with the other kings. It's like they didn't even consider him good enough to be buried with all the kings, even though he's in the line of David. Really important to be good in your rule, because if you're bad things will happen to you. The person that succeeds him is another example of bad counsel being very corrupting. This young king is, well, it's his son, but all of his older sons had been murdered during the raids of all these other countries, and his youngest son was the only one left. He becomes king. He gets some really bad counsel from his mother and some other folks, and he just falls in line and is an evil king. So it's really important today for us to see this and realize that who we hang out with, who we get counsel from, is extremely important. So make sure that it's not saying you can't hang out with people who don't believe, but you hang out with them for the purpose of bringing them to a saving knowledge. Don't just latch on to non-believers and expect you're going to get some good advice from them. And I'm talking godly advice. Now, they may be really good in knowing the rules of the city and politics and stuff like that, but anyway, it doesn't get you where you need to be. Tomorrow we're going to be in 2 Kings chapters 10 and 11, and then we're going to jump to 2 Chronicles, and we're going to pick up where we left off today in chapter 22, starting in verse 10, and we're going to read through 23, verse 21. So read ahead, find your law enforcement takeaway, and be safe. I'll see you here tomorrow.